Of all the old school 3D platformers that could have got rebooted, I think Kao the Kangaroo is probably one of the last ones people would think of. We're not talking Banjo or Kronk or something like Gex or even BlinkZ, you know, games that sold well and are still remembered and continue to be culturally relevant in some way. But Kao, oh, he's one of the long forgotten, a trilogy of fairly basic action-adventure platformers, hopping from Dreamcast to PS2, with all three available on PC as well. The third game was a Windows exclusive and it barely even left Poland. We didn't get that one in most countries, that's for sure. They weren't the most amazing games in the world. KO 1 was a pretty mediocre Crash clone where you run kinda slow, and KO Round 2 was more or less a simpler, clunkier take on Rayman 2. Nothing terribly impressive, but hey, it was solid enough, it was kinda fun, and how could you not love those big old goofy eyes? This seems to be the one people remember the most. It even had a PSP port, which had a completely different name for some reason. I still can't get over how bad that box art is.
This has got to be one of the goofiest examples of trying to make a box art appeal to Americans.
KO 3 felt more like an expansion to the second game than anything, having identical gameplay and graphics while being rather short in length too. It carried an Indiana Jones sense of adventure as you explored ruins, temples, and volcanoes, with higher focus on the puzzle solving this time around as well. The funky jams were exchanged for more ambient pieces, making KO 3 a surprisingly gentle and atmospheric experience. I've got some pretty fun memories of going through all these games and checking them all out. Except the Game Boy Advance version. That thing was so bad I flushed it down the toilet. Anyway, they may not be the best 3D platformers around, but they are incredibly charming. From the music, to the character design, to the fantastic environments and set pieces. For one reason or another, I found myself really loving that little kangaroo. And I don't think I'm the only one who does. I've read a lot of comments over the years from people sharing fond memories of KO, many of which coming from Poland, of course. And it seems to me the developers over at Tate Interactive also share that love. Like, I remember when they re-released KO Round 2 on Steam, they did it for only $2 freaking. They didn't care about making a whole bunch of money or anything like that. They just wanted people to more easily be able to play this thing again. And that is pretty damn commendable. You know, like, we live in an era where a lot of old games get remastered, which is super great, but sometimes they're a bit too pricey. It's like, do I want to pay that much money for a 15-year-old game? You know what I mean? But this was something different. This was a re-release based entirely on just love. So I'm sure many of you were fairly befuddled to see a Kao the Kangaroo reboot, but me, I wasn't all that surprised. I know there's passionate folk over there that genuinely care about this little kangaroo, but even still, it is pretty wild seeing it actually happen. I know passion is unfortunately only as useful as opportunity, so when that trailer finally busted out, it almost didn't even feel real. It didn't feel like they were just rebooting it either, but more so like they truly wanted to figure out what an original modern take on the series would look like. You know I live and die for underappreciated platformers like this, so a game like this getting made is almost like Christmas for me. They of course sent me over a review code for free. I got the PS5 version, that's gonna be the version I'm playing. I got the little guy installed just over there, so yeah, KO Rebooted. How did the game turn out? Why don't we play it and see. The game begins with Kao chasing his sister, Kaya, through a hazy purple area. A big spooky demon guy appears at the edge of a cliff and gobbles her up. Kao then leaps into action, and oh wow, I guess we're already in control. We beat the crap out of a bunch of frogs, and then we get another cutscene where Kao wakes up from a dream. Interpreting it as some sort of message, Kao then declares that he has to depart on a quest to save his sister and his father, who's been missing for quite some time now. Man, the story is so different than before. In KO 1 and 2, you were just trying to save your animal friends from this evil hunter guy, but here, the hunter is nowhere to be seen. It's like this big quest to save your family from forces beyond, the eternal dimension, or I don't know, something like that. It's a totally fresh story with a completely fresh canon. That new character design is quite a bit different than before. It doesn't have those balloon eyes anymore, which I do dearly miss. I thought he had a really cute little dumb design. It was really goofy and great, but here he feels a lot more like a spunky and heroic teenager. Yeah, it definitely doesn't have the same appeal as the original character, but as a brand new, original interpretation of what this kangaroo hero could look like, I do really like it. It's a very clean design. I like how expressive he can be, and the animations do have quite a bit of life to them.
Kyle's trying to tell me something. Maybe she knows what happened to Dad.
Well, I'm not gonna pretend like it's the best voice acting in the world or anything close, but I do really appreciate them using a Polish actor for KO. Giving most of the characters natural Polish accents does make the game feel a lot closer to home.
And 50% of the time, she walks 100% of the time.
The writing is pretty hit and miss for me. Like, some of the jokes do land, it did get the occasional chuckle out of me.
Those were the days.
Yeah, those were the days indeed. It's a pity that now there are no days.
But sometimes it feels like they can't go 2 minutes without trying to make some sort of forced pop culture reference.
Fly, my pretty, fly!
I mean, hey, a Roo tube here and a chew bubblegum there, that's fine, that's fun.
Wouldn't want that on RootTube.
But how in the hell are you making arrow to the knee jokes in 2022?
Someone's going to take an arrow to the knee, and the next you know, there'd be nowhere to come back to.
Maybe it wouldn't be so bad if they didn't feel painfully shoehorned in, but it feels like she said that for no reason. So before too long, we'll find herself in the first real level, and it's gonna feel mighty familiar to anybody who's played the second game. The moveset, the level design, the visuals, it all feels like a new version of KO Round 2. So what do we got here? There's the standard double jump for comfortably leaping across all of those simple gaps. There's a roll move for dodging stuff and getting underneath any narrow passages, finding some secrets that way. Ground pound for bopping those big buttons, a punch, and a tail whip attack for when you're attacking guys up in the air. Though unlike previous games, there's no longer any sort of hover move. KO2 had those weird, I don't know, helmet and knee wings? I still don't know what this is supposed to be, but KO3 had that parachute, which I actually did really like. But here, there's nothing like that at all. I mean, I guess the double jump is already more than enough to make landing easy, but I just kind of miss those set pieces from KO3 where you're like gliding through canyons and stuff. Though there is a new grapple move, you can never complain about one of those. Took me a couple of tries to really get a feel for the physics on it. The way it whips you forward is a little bit weird and jarring at first, but with good timing, you can really launch yourself forward. It's a super fun move. Chucking those boomerangs is once again a staple, but this time you're not going to be holding on to a collection of them to be used as strictly combat projectiles anymore. Now it's more like when you'd pick up some object in KO2 and would chuck it at something to knock it over or something like that. You'll pick one up by knocking open one of these little rock things, and from there you can throw it at the nearest switch or webbing or whatever it is you gotta hit. You can also pick up these little charges that'll give your boxing gloves an elemental attribute. For example, there's fire gloves for burning stuff up and beating some heat into those furnaces. There's ice gloves for freezing over ponds and pools so you can skate on them and explore all around. And there's also wind gloves for moving around objects from afar. Good for both puzzle solving and ripping the footing out from underneath these losers. It is always funny. You can even supercharge the boomerangs with these elements, making fire boomerangs for burning stuff up from afar, or maybe ice boomerangs for freezing waterfalls you can climb up. And buddy, oh my god, we gotta talk about that frickin' ledge grab, dude. It is god tier. The very frame you enter that ledge grab, you're able to jump right out of it, and it controls so freaking well. Every obstacle where you're jumping from ledge to climb up something or something like that, it all feels fantastic. Now, you were able to do this in KO2 and 3 as well, but buddy, it did not feel this freaking good back then. The combat's pretty different though. This has seen a total overhaul. So in KO1, it was as simple as it possibly could be. You just hit the guys and they hit you, and that's that. But KO Round 2 had a little bit more focus on it. It kind of felt like a way clunkier version of Rayman 2's combat. You know, it's all about that lock-on and trading projectiles and jumping around and stuff. But here, the focus is back on throwing those punches. Attacking will now have KO whip himself towards the nearest enemy, closing any small gaps, just like how Psychonauts 2 does. The roll move is also a lot more helpful as a dodge because it's way more responsive this time, so it's really good for getting out of any tight spots. You also get to toss out some satisfying aerials in the midst of the chaos. Enemies will sometimes take the high ground, either by standing on something tall or by flying around in the air. Platforming is all about jumping after all, so in my eyes, any good platforming combat is going to involve jumping in some way. Landing enough hits will build up this meter here, which once full will allow you to use a heavy attack. You get a base drop, and KO sends out a shockwave, obliterating everybody around you. you know, I have to admit, this is actually rather satisfying combat. It is simple and kind of button mashy and, you know, a little repetitive, yes, but the back and forth between landing those hits and getting to bust out the explosion, it's a pretty satisfying gameplay loop that never really manages to overstay its welcome. The fights never go on way too long or anything, so it ends up feeling like a nice, empowering change of pace that's sprinkled lightly between the platforming and exploration. The lock-on is absolute garbage though. I mean, I found it helpful for dodging attacks from larger guys and bosses every now and then, but man, this thing just pulls in way too close for comfort. Why are we so close to the ground? Why are we looking upward? Why can't I see anything? The lock-on in KO 2 and 3 was fine. The camera hung back and you got 2 visual confirmations that you were indeed locking on. But here it's like, God, it's just so much more playable if you ignore it and just let the camera hang back naturally. After we're done that first opener level, we then arrive at HUBWORLD Village, which serves as the game's first hub world, and it is so apparent so quickly that they put a lot more work into this hub world than previous games. While I do fondly remember the dark pirate aesthetics of KO2's hub world, it was pretty void of anything to actually do. Mostly just existed for the cutscenes to unfold. I mean, they didn't even have very many parts of it actually go to the different levels. For most of them, you would just open a level select by talking to an NPC. KO3's hub world was a little bit better. I liked the little village here by the beach, but again, there wasn't really anything to actually do outside of talking to a couple of NPCs. You couldn't even go inside any of the houses. But these new hub worlds have so much more going on. There's collectibles to find, you can buy items, there's all these characters you can talk to, each with their own funny dialogue. You can even go inside all of the houses. I hated that you couldn't do that in KO3. Probably shouldn't have let me though, all I did was break their stuff. Oh, that was the light up, whoops. So you might have noticed that I said first hub world. Yeah, there are 4 of these in total actually. Outside of the Kangaroo Village, we also have a little forest area that's littered with papayas and monkeys that are worshipping a false messiah. There's the snowy mountains where you got these Himalayan temples towering over you with mountain goats everywhere. And lastly, there's the Eternal Island, a carnival from hell that's been tainted by the Eternal Realm. And obviously each hub area will house a handful of levels each, and you actually go to the level by going to the level. You go to the volcano by going up to the volcano. You go to the woods by going over to the woods. They're doing the thing that I wanted KO2's hub world to do. To gain access to a level, you'll first have to collect enough runes to break open the big purple barrier in front of it. You know, just like getting enough stars or jiggies or something like that. You can find these by either playing through levels or by simply exploring the hub world around you. The attention to detail is just outstanding. Like everywhere you look, you can find all these funny little objects that tell a story, like these weight benches where somebody was bench pressing balloons. Visual design is just excellent. Like how easy it is to tell where all of the levels are. You can see all these pockets of purple energy in the distance. That is visual design 101 right there. I gotta say, like, the KO reboot has hands down the best hub areas in the entire series. I was hoping I'd be able to say they outdid themselves, and yeah, they absolutely outdid themselves. Each level is going to unfold in a pretty linear manner, but you can find a bunch of off-beaten pathways and secret rooms as well, so there's plenty of reason to keep looking around. The obstacles are all pretty easygoing, the jumps are all pretty simple, and you'll have your occasional puzzle or fight or mechanism to interact with. It's just like the old games, a very basic action-adventure platformer. So now that the game has polished gameplay that's, fun enough, it's really just down to the environments to carry the rest, and boy do the environments carry the rest! They did such a good job on them. Every level is just brimming with bright, colorful detail. They're all really interesting locations that are fun as hell to explore. You got this giant juice factory that's making the rivers run bright orange with papaya juice, platforming across these giant vats that are churning it like butter. There's a volcano with this gigantic laboratory at the center, so you have all these crooked pipes all over the place. There's a Himalayan hot spring retreat complete with showers and spas, and you're just going in and ruining everyone's day. And don't even get me started on that final world. It's a big spooky carnival. Hallways are cluttered with traps and hellish circus scenery. Chain chomps, except they're like these big freaky pairs of wind-up teeth trying to get at you. You're gonna be platforming through some pretty cool scenarios. One thing you won't be doing, however, are those high-speed sections that KO2 had. They were kinda jank and you would die a lot, but they were kinda fun, so I was hoping to see like an improved version of that here, but I guess they figured not to revisit that idea. There is one chase sequence, but it feels a lot more like a Crash Bandicoot boulder level. The snowboarding doesn't come back either, which I kind of hope to see. It was like so bad in the first game, barely even playable. You had to go at like 1 mile an hour, you were just guaranteed to die. And it was so much better in the second game, so I was hoping, well, maybe we'd have another step. Maybe we'd have a really cool and fun snowboarding minigame here, but well. Though the grinding from KO 3 does make a comeback. It's that magnetic kind of grinding that you've seen in games like this and this and this, but while I do kind of find this sort of grinding a little bit tiresome and quite overused in games, I do like how they implemented it. You know, instead of feeling like a cleverly disguised QuickTime event for the sake of variety, they're efficiently used to bridge different level chunks really nicely. So it feels less like, oh, here's the part of the level that's a rail, time to push the right buttons and react to the obstacles. It's more like just a thing to get you back to a previous area quickly, and they just throw some coins at you along the way. They even blend a couple of them into these sliding segments here. I feel like they work really well here. I mean, you know, a slide's all about that forward momentum, so throwing a couple of rails in there just makes a whole lot of sense. The checkpoint system is based on KO Round 2, so you're not going to be collecting and manually placing checkpoints like the first game. If you're a fan of Demon Turf, they didn't bring that idea back. You just see a bell, you ring it, and that's where they'll put you if you fall off the stage or if you run out of health. Losing all your health, of course, will cost you a life, which, never happened to me. Dude, like, the game hands out lives like candy, but it also hands out heart containers like candy, so before I knew it, I was practically invincible. I had so much health, nobody could kill me. I literally died twice in the entire game. You see all this footage where I'm showing you the ghost animation. I had to die on purpose to get that. That is pretty awesome, though, the classic animation there. It is a little bit different, though. Yeah, you're not an angel anymore, and it is way briefer, but hey, I'm always glad to see them bringing back a lot of those iconic visuals from the old games. He'll even still jump rope if you let him idle for a while. And how can you have a Kao the Kangaroo game without the neck thing? This was like my favorite thing about these weird games. When you go in water and his neck inexplicably extends to keep his head above water so he can still breathe. It's never explained, it's never acknowledged. It just is. They still do that here, but it's nowhere as apparent. The bodies of waters aren't nearly as deep, and on top of that, they're a lot harder to see through. So it's like, yeah, he's doing it, but it's kind of hard to tell. They're definitely not trying to hide it though, because you can use the neck in an all-new way. When you're grappling those mesh ceilings, you can hang down to grab anything below you. That is just great. He even still uses his freaking ears to climb. God, like, so many aspects of this character have been completely preserved in this reboot. There were a handful of things I did find myself missing though, like how he would pretend his boxing gloves are binoculars when he would go in first person. Like, come on, that was adorable. Or how he would skip around joyfully every time you want to fight. He doesn't do that anymore. I guess it is hard to complain too much because they really did go all freaking out on the overall presentation for this thing. It is a damn gorgeous game. I especially love all of the crookedness you see in a lot of areas. They don't do it as heavily as in games like Rayman or Psychonauts, but they do lean into it enough to give it a personality that manages to go beyond the obvious Toys for Bob comparison. But hands down, the single greatest detail they included in this entire game are all of the crabs. They conveniently stick right at the edge of big-ass cliffs.
Bye.
Like, you can't resist, he's right there. There's no penalty, you can't not. You have to. See ya. Okay, one more. What? There we go. Alright, so at the end of each hub world, there's going to be a boss fight. Bosses were never really a strong suit of the series. In fact, in the first game, they're straight up terrible, but here, they're actually pretty decent. Not amazing, nothing is gonna knock your socks off or anything, but each fight does manage to feel fresh. They all have a handful of interesting moments that keep you changing your strategy. You're not gonna find yourself just doing the same thing over and over, so it is a really big step up over previous games. You know, now that I've been playing this for a little bit, it's actually pretty wild to me just how much they improved here. Like, not even just stuff like the level design, the boss fights and that sort of thing, but just generally improving the feel of the controls and everything. Like, you pick up the controller and you push the buttons right, and it's like, this is undeniably Kao the Kangaroo. This is the same moveset, the same controls and everything. But it feels so new. It's like tight and precise and it's smooth as butter. It is just so surreal playing this. Another big improvement comes from something they didn't do, and that is making the vehicle stages return. They don't have a single vehicle mission in this entire game, which is definitely for the better. I never liked any of them at all, especially not the frickin' plane level in KO3. That was boring as hell. No extra characters either. You're not going to be playing as Gadget this time, which I also don't really miss that much. But even though KO is only playable all on his lonesome, you can spruce the guy up with all of these unlockable costumes. They even have the one from KO3. But let's be real, that doesn't matter at all because you can also unlock the classic model, dude! If you're not sold on his new design, you don't have to be. Collecting all 3 letters of KO in each level will unlock another hat for purchase. Not entirely sure what unlocks the skins, I think that might just be from beating the levels themselves, but either way, I ended up having access to the classic skin really early on, so you don't really have to play all that far into the game before it can get old school. I also kinda like this dark KO skin. If there's anything that will always remain a guilty pleasure for me, it's evil versions of the main characters. I will always appreciate getting a goofy dark side version as a skin. Man, I found myself a lot more impressed with this game than I expected to be. I mean, like, it is still just a basic adventure platformer. It's not ever going to impress anybody in the way that any of the big guys will, but it's well put together, it's charming as hell, and most of all, it's pretty darn fun. I had a blast slamming through this game, dude, and it's decently meaty too. Like, it's not all that short a game. You got 4 whole hub worlds with a good chunk of levels each and a boss fight. Took me probably about 7 to 8 hours to complete, but of course that would go on a little bit longer if you wanted to go back and 100% each level and like get all the costumes and stuff. It's also not that hard a platinum trophy to get to if you care about that sort of thing. My only real gripes are all just technical things. You know, sometimes the animations don't really convey what's happening all that well, or they might feel kind of rushed or weak here and there when a minor character appears. You know, nothing you wouldn't already expect occasionally from a smaller budget title. But what I did keep noticing was a lot of sound mixing issues. You know, sometimes after doing a bonus level, I'd return to the main level and the music would just stop. Really awkward. Some parts of the game also felt weirdly quiet, like there weren't enough sound effects for what was going on. These weird sheep things, for example, they make a sound when they're prepared for launch, but not when they launch. Just little things here and there that made some areas not feel quite as full of life as others. It is important to note, though, that I am playing the game a week before release. You would know it from the release of this review. It's a bit late, but I was playing it early, so I would imagine a lot of these things are probably either going to be fixed or may have already have been fixed. Not gonna hold a gun to the game's head just because the pot animations didn't play sometimes, you know. I do know some people did have issues with the autosave not working on some versions, though. Not sure if that's still an issue or not, but I'm sure it is something that developers are aware of and will patch in time. Game's pretty much available on everything. It's on PS4 and 5, Switch, Xboxes, and PC, of course. Right now it's up for $30 US, 40 Canadian. If you like casual platformers with vibrant levels and great visual design, then it's not a terrible price, but I would imagine most people are probably gonna wait for it to go on sale. I think it'd make for a perfect kids game. Like, I could easily see this being a fantastic choice as somebody's first platformer. Very solid game to introduce somebody to the genre with, but if you're looking for something that can challenge you, then you might not really care a whole lot about it. You're probably better off playing something like Demon Turf or Blue Fire or Sybil if you're looking for something real brutal. I would say it's totally worth it if you are a big fan of Kao the Kangaroo, though. You're pretty much going to be getting a totally fresh take on the second 2 games, and I do have to say, going at something familiar and having it feel totally new, that is a really cool feeling. Man, it is just still so weird that I'm playing a new Kao the Kangaroo game, dude. I mean, like, I had to keep stopping myself every now and then just to really take in, just to remind myself how cool it is that this gets to freaking exist. I mean, it is really not often that we get to see a little guy like Kao get a big new shiny release that looks like something like this. So, man, here's the frickin' 3D platformers, dude. Here's to the frickin' underdog, dude. I think if this game proves anything, it's that it really doesn't matter who you are. Like, as long as you get a team of passionate people behind you that are willing to pitch in a little bit of love, I think anybody can make a solid comeback. Hi, welcome to the end, Slate. Hope you enjoyed watching this video. It's been really cool returning to Kao the Kangaroo. I played a lot of it. Shut up, down. No, thank you. If you'd like to support the show, I've got a $1 podcast over on my Patreon. You get to hear me and Brady talk about, like, Sega Saturn and bullshit. I don't know. But what I do know is Mario